Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, and today we're going to be talking about the price of lemons. The price of lemons. But first, I always forget I wrote a book called American Murder Houses. Whenever I talk to people on this show about books I've written, I often talk about the Turbine Car, or the Tucker, or the Winged Cars, or Michigan history. But I actually wrote a book about American murder houses. So stick around if you're interested in that. At the end, I'll explain to you what the book is about and how you can get a copy at a vast discount. But speaking of vast discounts, what we're talking about today is the price of lemons. And I get this question quite a bit, and we've discussed it recently, talking about Sam and his pizza car, and then the lemon issues going on down in his neck of the woods, where he has recently bought at least one and possibly two former lemon automobiles. And the debate always becomes, are lemon cars something you should buy? Now, here's the thing. As you might imagine, everything has got a fair price. Something, if it's something, it has value, right? Anything's got value. So, let's go with the urban legend about the car where somebody died in the car. And the car's got value because you can still sell the hood. You can sell the wheels off it, right? So everything has got some value. So the question then becomes, you're shopping for cars and you're looking at particular makes and models of cars, and somebody presents to you a car for sale, and they go, here's a car that's for sale, and it's a decent deal, and one thing you should know about it, assuming they tell you this, is that it's a former lemon automobile. This car was bought by its original owner, and it was bought back by the manufacturer under a state lemon law somewhere, and has got back into the stream of commerce, and now it's being offered for sale. And this could be the second owner, the third owner, the fourth owner. And I actually got a specific email, and I had a discussion back and forth with somebody about this just in the last few days. And they asked me the question. They said, Steve, we're looking at this car, and they told me the make, model, and all that. And they go, and the price they're offering it for is slightly discounted, but it's because it was a lemon. They said, do you think this is a potentially good buy? And I said, well, there's always the issue that comes up in these cases, and this is where it falls apart, is you are always thinking you know everything, okay? And so when you're shopping for a car and you're looking at a car and you don't know what's wrong with that car, you've got to factor in the possibility that things could go wrong with the car. So when someone's selling you a vehicle and they say, well, it's a former lemon, but here's what was wrong with it, the question is, are they even telling you the truth? How would you know that they're telling you the truth? And that's, for instance, what happened in the case with the guy who emailed me recently. He said, Steve, I was told that the reason the car was bought back in California was because there was a problem with the defrosters that's since been fixed. And I said, okay. And I said, how did they prove that to you? And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, they just told it to me. Okay. I hope you don't believe everything you're told by people who are trying to sell you used cars. And I don't know if it's a dealership or an individual who is selling the car. But the point is, he asked me, he goes, well, are you suggesting this might not be true? And I said, yeah, of course it might not be true. And he said, well, how would you verify that? I go, that's the problem. So we have to understand how the lemon process works, right? So you come to me, I'm an attorney, I handle lemon law claims. You say, Steve, I got a brand new car. It's been in the shop 5 times in the first year since I've owned it. It's going to more than qualify because the times it was in the shop, they never fixed it. The problem is a severe problem with the transmission, okay? So depending on who the manufacturer is, I might not even file a lawsuit. I might just simply send a demand letter to the manufacturer and say, hey, I got a good one here. Are you going to buy it back or do I have to sue you? Some manufacturers make you sue them. Some manufacturers don't. But if I sue them, even if I sue them, okay, and there's a lawsuit filed in a circuit court in Michigan or the equivalent in one of the other 49 states, there's a lawsuit that gets filed, the manufacturer files an answer, and then the case settles, okay? And 99.9% of all cases filed in America settle, okay? So the case settles with the manufacturer saying, you know something, we'll buy this car back, we'll give your client the money they're entitled to, and we will then dispose of the car ourselves. As noted previously, only 12 states in America, or give or take, require the manufacturers to brand the title the next time the car changes hands. So if you're in one of the title branding states, you'd actually see the title and say automobile manufacturer warranty buyback or something like that. And it would be an indication that the vehicle was bought back under a state lemon law. But outside of those states, you wouldn't get that kind of a notice unless you bought the Carfax and it appeared in the Carfax, which it doesn't always appear in the Carfax. But here's the problem. It doesn't say what the underlying defect was that got the vehicle bought back under the lemon law, simply that it was bought back. Okay? And so the guy who was emailing with me the other day said, Steve, he goes, how would I determine that? I'm curious, like as a thought exercise, how would I do that? And I said, that's the problem. You really can't figure this out unless, and it would take so much detective work, it wouldn't be worthwhile. Unless you can determine where the original lawsuit was filed, if in fact there was one, and then you go and pull the court records from that court to see what the allegations were in the complaint and to see if the complaint contained repair orders. Okay? I suppose you could, there's another way you could do it, that you could do this and it would be a little more difficult. But let's suppose your car that you're looking at is a Chrysler product, okay? Chrysler bought the thing back, put it back in stream of commerce. You're now looking at this car going, I wonder if this car is worth looking at or buying. You could get the VIN, the vehicle identification number, off that car and then find a friendly Chrysler dealer and see if they will run the VIN for you to show you the warranty history. And that would show you the repair attempts that occurred in the first 2 years of ownership. And you could look at it that way and say, okay, here's at least what the complaints were. But now the bigger problem, of course, is assuming that you actually got that information given to you. You would then have to determine whether or not the car you're looking at it as it sits today, whether or not it still has that problem or the problem was fixed. And again, I preach about this and no one seems to buy it, that they don't buy cars back for trivial problems. The fact that the defroster didn't work in California strikes to me as sounding a little bit trivial. I'm not quite sure what would make a defroster not work. I've never had a car where somebody actually said, Steve, I want it to, bought back because the defroster doesn't work. I've never even heard that one before. And I'm in Michigan where we need defrosters 12 months out of the year pretty much. But he said, but that was what the guy told me. The defroster didn't work. It got bought back, but then they fixed the defroster and now the car is fine. And I said, well, number one, that doesn't sound right to me. Number two, the problem with a lemon law buyback is that the manufacturer couldn't fix the car. The manufacturer actually said, we could not fix this car, we'll buy it back. Now, is it possible that a car was bought back and then somebody spotted the problem and fixed it? Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. And I discussed this with Sam on the video that he and I did together. And it's always possible that somebody overlooked something. And I've spoken to guys who work in dealerships, mechanics and service writers, and I've spoken to people who are zone reps and equivalent factory reps at manufacturers, and they all said this happens, where everybody has ruled out the obvious stuff, they've run out of opportunities to fix it, and they finally said, screw it, buy it back. And then somebody goes, wait a second, eureka, I figured it out. And they figured out what it was, and boom, there you go. So it's possible. It's possible. But then this gets us to the next step. Getting back to the price of the lemon. What's a lemon worth? What's it worth for you to buy that car? Give your hard-earned cash to buy that car. And one of the issues is the unknown. Now, if you could prove, absolutely prove, that the vehicle was brought back in for service 4 times because it had an engine problem, and then after it was bought back, they replaced the engine, literally replaced the entire engine. Now it has no engine problem, whatever the problem may have been. It's been solved by the engine replacement. I think in a case like that, if you don't mind a car that's had a heart transplant, knock yourself out. Go right ahead and buy it and price it as if it was any other car that it had an engine replacement. But keep in mind that the title history showing a lemon law buyback is a tainted history. It's always going to be following that car around. When you go to sell the car, someone's going to pull a Carfax. You go to trade the car in, the dealership's going to pull a Carfax. So someone's going to pull the Carfax and go, oh, it's a lemon history. Boom, we want a discount. Everyone wants a discount. So you're going to hopefully get a discount when you buy the car because you're going to give the person you give the car to next a discount. But the other problem is, like I said, is that people always want to think they know everything. And interestingly enough, there was actually a guy, don't want to get this wrong, so I'm going to look it up for you really quickly, but a gentleman named George Akerlof who wrote a paper called The Market for Lemons, Quality, Uncertainty, and the Market Mechanism. It came out in 1970. And he actually was talking about how economics works with the used car market. And he pointed out that there's a problem in the used car market, and he used it as an example. He wasn't talking about cars per se. He was talking about any marketplace in which you've got a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers, and a lot of transactions taking place. For economics, they often do that. And he said basically, a person who's got a good used car, knows that their car is worth more than the average used car of similar make and model and year and all that. Okay. And so what his theory was is that the people with the good used cars are less prone to sell because they can't get what the market actually should pay them. But the people with the sketchy used cars are happy to unload the cars because they're sketchy. And as we all know, Blue Books and other things that do valuations on cars often talk about averages. Averages achieved at auction, or averages reported on RD108 or something, application for title, or some kind of averages. And so if you've got a car that's above average, chances are when you go to sell it, you're not going to get what it's worth because the other one's going to pull down the value. And so he was pointing out that people with cars that are in really good condition, that are worth more than average, those are the buyers who are less likely to want to sell. But again, he's talking about the disparity in information, because the person who owns the car and drives the car, a private seller in particular, knows more about the car and understands its value, its true value, and what might be knocking its value down. And a car buyer can only go off of what they're told by the seller and what they can see with their own eyes and what they can deduce from a test drive. And so the buyer is always at a slight disadvantage. And so smart buyers are always going to factor that into price. They're going to want to pay less. They're going to want to pay, below or at average price. And again, they're going to tend to want to do that. But there is something in human instinct where we tend to think, hey, look, I test drove it. I looked at it. I walked around it. The guy who's selling it to me seems like a nice guy. I'm going to believe the guy, or I'm going to trust that this car is okay. And I don't think you can put that level of trust into a car that a manufacturer could not fix. They actually threw their hands up and said, we couldn't fix it. And what's funny is I hear from people all the time who say, Steve, the lemon law is just cars being bought back because buyer's remorse, and the manufacturers do that all the time. They don't, and I've done entire podcasts on why that's not the case. But more importantly here, I'm simply talking about if you were to encounter a lemon for sale, somebody says, this car is a former lemon. They actually disclose that to you. You pull a Carfax and it shows it, okay? And then they say, it was bought back for, and they give you some really trivial thing. It was bought back for and I think that's one of the reasons that people believe that to be true, is they've heard all the time that this is what it was bought back for. When in reality, they don't know what it was actually bought back for. Because you wouldn't know that, like I said, unless you went and pulled the actual complaint that was filed in the court, spoke to the original owner or the original owner's attorney, or actually pulled the vehicle's warranty history from the manufacturer. And the funny thing is that of all the people I've spoken to in 27 years of doing this, and in 4 or 5 years of doing podcasts and videos, I've never once had anybody come to me and say, Steve, I'm looking at buying a lemon. They told me it was bought back for this one reason, and I've confirmed that. I've actually pulled the warranty history. I've found the complaint that was filed in the court. I can prove that this is in fact what it's bought back for. Therefore, I can check this one thing to see if it's fixed or not. If it's fixed, it's a good buy. If it's not fixed, obviously it's still a lemon. I've never had anyone produce that for me. So I know how this goes. The second this video goes up, I'm going to get a bunch of responses from people who are going to say, Steve, a friend of mine bought a lemon because it was bought back because there was a really, really tiny squeak coming from the right rear door that apparently somebody just sprayed WD-40 on and fixed, but they bought it back for that. And I know that that's true because my friend wouldn't lie to me. Or I read on a bulletin board a guy who's a service manager at a dealership. He said they buy cars back all the time because someone buys the car and they just don't like the way it rides. They bring it back and they complain, and they lemon law the car and get the car bought back. And I'm using the air quotes there facetiously, okay? They lemon law the car, which you can't do for a trivial thing that's not even a defect. So the true price of a lemon, what it's actually worth, is, one, discounted because of the fact it's got a lemon history. Even if it's fixed, it's got a lemon history that's going to knock the value down. You better get that discount when you buy because you're going to have to give it when you sell. And number two, it's discounting it for the problem that probably wasn't fixed because you probably don't know what that problem actually was. And if someone has documentation to show you, here, I can prove to you what the problem was, yeah, then you might actually have a little more knowledge and you can actually factor it in that way. But in reality, 99% of the people I speak to who are looking at lemons are calling me and contacting me saying, Steve, how do I figure out what was wrong with it? Because it doesn't make sense what they're telling me. And how would I know in the first place? And how would you know in the first place? It's going to take a lot of research and you might not even be able to do it, okay? I don't know how likely a car dealer is when you walk into the VIN number and say, hey, can you pull the warranty history on this car? I'm thinking about buying it. I don't know if they'll do that or not. I mean, I've heard stories where they say yes. I've heard stories where they say no. So that is how you figure out the true price of a lemon. But like always, because I'm the one who's paranoid in this relationship, I would really think twice about it doing it unless you got a fantastic discount. Now, I have to tell you, a couple years ago, I wrote a book called American Murder Houses. And it's a coast-to-coast tour of the most notorious houses of homicide. And, it's not a car book. But basically what I did is I made a list of 24 or 25 of the houses around America where murders occurred that have become things people go gawk at. People now go and look at the house and go, hey, that's the house, that's the house. The John Benet Ramsey house or the Nicole Simpson house or the Lizzie Borden house or the, there's 25 of them in there, okay? The Villisca axe murder house, And what I did is I'm criteria-wise, I said the house has got to still be standing. Okay, the house is still there. Okay, so the John Wayne Gacy house is not in there. And what I did then is I give the address of the house, a description of the house from a realtor's point of view. I explain the murder, what happened with the murder, who got killed, and how we feel about that and what we know now. And then I explain the history of the house since then. So like the Lizzie Borden house, for instance, today is a bed and breakfast. You can go take a tour of it and spend the night if you want. Okay. Two of the three houses in the Manson murders, two of them are still standing. One of them is not. So I go through all that and explain all of that. But again, American Murder Houses, it came out a few years ago, and I have to admit this, it's actually my best-selling book. It's outsold all my other books, and it still sells very, very well. So I got a case of them. There's a stack of them there, but I got a whole pile of them outside. I got a case of these, and on Amazon right now, I know what it's selling for, but I'm going to sell it for, it's about a 33% discount below that. So if you're interested in a copy of American Murder Houses, email me directly. I'll put the email address right there. Email me directly, and we'll do the whole thing through Square, which is like PayPal. It's secure and all that. I just did a ton of books that way recently, another book thing I was doing. So American Murder Houses, if you're interested, email me directly. I'll hook you up. Otherwise, questions or comments, as always, to the information in the credits. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.